In the ayah number 56, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِدْرِيسَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Allah continues to relate about the messengers and about the prophets. And now after Ismail alayhi salam, Ishmael, now Allah says, وَاذْكُرْ, and remember and mention فِي الْكِتَابِ, in the book, Idris. إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Actually, he was a man of truth and he was a prophet. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. We have seen the same wording about Ibrahim alayhi salam in the ayah number 41. Allah said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. And now وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِدْرِيسَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. The same wording, but there is an exception, and the only exception, the merely exception, is the name. Here in the ayah number 41, Abraham, and now here in the ayah number 56, Idris. So Allah described Idris alayhi salam with the same thing. He said, Siddiqan, a man of truth, and a prophet, a Nabi, like Ibrahim alayhi salam. Then he said, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. We raised him in a high state. وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. Some prophet, a messenger, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala related us many things about them. For example, Musa alayhi salam, you may find in Quran in many places about him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving information about him, about his stories, and some of them less than Moses alayhi salam, not long as the story of Moses alayhi salatu wassalam, and some of them only Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned about their name. And one of them, Idris alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't talk about him much in Quran, but only mentioned his name and said that وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. We raised him in a high state. We know that there is many prophets, many messengers. Allah the Almighty didn't mention them in Quran. As He says, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِّن قَبْلِكَ. Indeed, we have sent messengers before you. مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَصَصْنَا عَلَيْكَ. Of them we have related to you. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ لَمْ نَقْصُصْ عَلَيْكَ. And of them we did not relate them to you. We didn't mention them in the book. So many messengers out of the book, you cannot find their even names in Quran. So some of them only with their names in Quran, in the book. Some of them there is some things about them, and some of them Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned them much more than the others. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِدْرِيسَ. Idris alayhi salam, Allah the Almighty mentioned him in the book, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِدْرِيسَ. And we know that he was a man of truth and he was a prophet. إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Then we know in the ayah, according to the ayah number 57, Allah says, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ. We raised him مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا, in a high state, into a high state. It's difficult to understand from the ayah whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about his degree as a prophet, because we know he says وَلَقَدْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَ النَّبِيِّينَ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Indeed, we have preferred some prophets over others. There is degrees between them, some of them better than the others, but Allah knows the best. Allah says there is difference between them. وَلَقَدْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَ النَّبِيِّينَ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَآتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ زَبُورًا. For example, we have given Dawood Zabur. In somewhere else, Allah says, مِنْهُمْ مَنْ كَلَّمَ اللَّهِ. Of them, some whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to. وَرَفَعَ بَعْضَهُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ دَرَجَاتٍ. And Allah raised some of them in degree according the other. So we do not know here whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about something like this, that his degree was very high. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised him, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. Or did Allah the Almighty raised him physically with his body? وَرَفَعْنَاهُمْ. There is some narrations about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did actually raise him, but according Quran, if you look at the Quran only, it's difficult to understand something like that, or it's impossible. And that narrations, I don't know how much reliable, because the narrations in Tafsir, most of them or some of them, it's difficult to trust them, because some of them depends on we say Israeliyat, and some Jew people and Jewish traditions. So if you look at Quran, what we understand from Ayah 56 and 57, that there was a messenger named Idris alayhi salam. Allah wanted to mention him in the book, so he is important. Allah honored him by mentioning him here, and he was Siddiqan. It's not some simple. Allah says he was Siddiq, a man of truth, and Nabiyan, a prophet, like he described Ibrahim alayhi salam. وَرَفَعْنَاهُ. And Allah said, we raised him مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. Whether he raised him really like Jesus Christ, because Allah raised him physically. He said, إِنِّي رَافِعُكَ إِلَيَّ. I'm going to raise you upon me, to me. وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. We have raised him into a high state. Let's move on to the ayah number 58. Allah says here, أُولَٰئِكَ, those. He addresses the messengers whom he mentioned in the surah, like Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his son Ishaq, and his grandson Yaqub, and Moses, one of his grandson, and his brother Ibrahim, then the other son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishmael, and now Idris alayhi salam. Allah now says أولئك, generally. He says those الذين أنعم الله عليهم. They are those whom Allah blessed them, granted them, favored them. الذين أنعم الله. These are the people whom Allah favored them. So their description did by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very important for us, because we want to be among those whom Allah favored them, whom Allah blessed them. We say in Surah Al-Fatiha in every prayer, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us into the straight path, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, the path of those whom you granted them, whom you blessed them. So the same wording here, أنعم الله عليهم. These are those whom Allah blessed them. أنعم الله عليهم. من النبيين, of the prophets. So we understand that النبيين, it's general than messengership, because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Ibrahim alayhi salam. We know that he was a Rasul, and Allah said he was also a Nabi here in the ayah. And he talked about Ishaq and Yaqub. We know that they were Nabi, they had prophethood from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah said وَكُلًّا جَعَلْنَا نَبِيًّا. And like him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Musa alayhi salam, and he said كَانَ رَسُولًا نَبِيًّا, he was Rasul and Nabi, messenger and a prophet. And then he talked about Harun, he was Nabi. So Musa's status was more than the status of his brother. He was a Rasul, but his brother Harun was only a Nabi. It's very clear. Look at the ayah number 51. Allah says about Musa, وَكَانَ رَسُولًا نَبِيًّا, he was Rasul and Nabi, both. But about Harun alayhi salam, he was only a Nabi. Then he talked about Ismail, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said Ismail was like Musa alayhi salam, Rasul and Nabi, a messenger and a prophet. وَكَانَ رَسُولًا نَبِيًّا. Then he mentioned Idris alayhi salam. He said about him that he was Nabi, Siddiqan Nabiyya, like Harun alayhi salam. So some of them only Nabi, only a prophet, and the others at the same time they are messenger and a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he starts to talk about them generally, he uses an-nabiyyin, because this is general, this is common between them. But messengership is a higher state, a higher position. So we can say every messenger is a prophet at the same time, but every prophet may not be a messenger, like Harun alayhi salam or the others. So Allah says here in the ayah number 58, أُولَٰئِكَ, those الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ, they are the people whom Allah favored upon them, granted them, مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ, of the prophets, مِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ آدَمَ, among the progeny of Adam. They are from his descendant. Then Allah says, وَمِمَّنْ حَمَلْنَا مَعَ نُوحٍ, and of those whom we carried with Noah, with Nuh. وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ, and of the progeny of Abraham. وَإِسْرَائِيلَ, and the progeny of Israel, Yaqub alayhi salam. وَمِمَّنْ هَدَيْنَا وَاجْتَبَيْنَا, we know that all of them from the progeny of Adam alayhi salam. So what is the point saying that وَمِمَّنْ حَمَلْنَا مَعَ نُوحٍ, and of those whom we carried with Noah? And what's the point in saying وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ, and of the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam? For example, if we start with Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe him min dhurriyyati Adam. He is one of the children of Adam, like everyone else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the same time honoring Adam alayhi salam, because Ibrahim is from his progeny, and Ibrahim alayhi salam at the same time from the progeny of Nuh alayhi salam, because Allah said about Nuh, وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. After that calamity which happened to the people of Nuh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rescued from that ship, the ship of Noah, the people of those whom only from his progeny. وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. So we can say that he is the second Adam, the second father of the humanity. So Ibrahim alayhi salam is also from his progeny. Then Allah says وَمِن ذُرِّيَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ, and of the progeny of Ibrahim. So he is now talking about Ishaq and Yaqub. Of course, Ishaq and Yaqub at the same time they are from the progeny of Ibrahim and Nuh alayhi salam. But this description, the first description, is valid for Ibrahim alayhi salam and is valid for Ishaq and Yaqub. But now the description وَمِن ذُرِّيَّةِ Ibrahim is only valid for Ishaq and Yaqub. So when Allah says وَمِن ذُرِّيَّةِ Ibrahim, we have given prophethood from the progeny of Ibrahim, so Allah honoring him. So we can see, we understand that after Adam alayhi salam and after those whom carried with Nuh alayhi salam, there is a difference in the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. There is some prophethood came through his progeny. So the difference of the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam is understood from this ayah. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّةِ Ibrahim, like Ishaq and Yaqub, whom Allah mentioned here, and many others from his progeny. Then Allah honored one of his son and said وَإِسْرَائِيلَ, مِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ إِسْرَائِيل. There is no difference of opinion between the scholars about Ishaq, that he is the Israel alayhi salam. About Yaqub alayhi salam, that he was the one who named Israel alayhi salam. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honoring Yaqub that he sent many prophets from his progeny. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْرَائِيلَ أُولَئِكَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ آدَمَ وَمِنْ مَنْ حَمَلْنَا مَعَ نُوحٍ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْرَائِيلَ. Like the ayah number 56, or the ayat which started with وَذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ, and mentioned in the book. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning them, but generally without name by name. He says many prophets from the progeny of Adam alayhi salam, and many prophets from those whom we carried with Nuh alayhi salam, and many prophets from the progeny of Ibrahim and the progeny of Israel. And Ismail alayhi salam, who mentioned here, is one of the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He is his son. Then Allah said, وَمِمَّنْ هَدَيْنَا, not only from the prophets, but of those whom we guided. So, those whom Allah favored, those whom Allah blessed, they are not limited with the messengers, with the prophets, but also there is people whom Allah guided, وَمِمَّنْ هَدَيْنَا, of those whom we guided, وَاجْتَبَيْنَا, and we chose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He also blessed them whom He guided, among whom He guided and He chose. وَمِمَّنْ هَدَيْنَا وَاجْتَبَيْنَا. We ask the Almighty to give us, to grant us the same blessing, and we repeat this question in every prayer, actually in every rak'ah. We say, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. About the prophets, we have seen their description and how they lived and how they were men of truth and how they worshipped Allah with prayer and charity, and how did they strive to please Allah. Allah says, for example, about Ismail, وَكَانَ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ مَرْضِيًّا, and how they submitted themselves to Him. But now we need here another description about these people whom Allah blessed them from the prophets and from the others. Allah says in the end of the ayah, number 58, a description about them. He says, إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ الرَّحْمَنِ. Look at them. When the ayat of Allah recited upon them, إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ الرَّحْمَنِ, when you go and recite the signs of the Almighty, the Most Gracious, they are not like the others, because we know that some people, when the ayat, the signs, the verses of Allah recited on them, they behave as if they didn't hear. Allah says, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ أَفَّاكٍ أَثِيمٍ. Woe unto those whom he is affak and athim. He is sinful and he is turning away. Whenever he sees the truth, he do not acknowledge it. Affak. He is not an upright man. Affak and athim. Yasma'u, he hears. Yasma'u ayat Allahi. He hears the ayat of Allah. Tutla alayhi, being recited upon him. ثم يصر مستكبرا. Then he insists كأن لم يسمعها. He insists to behave as if he didn't hear them. ثم يصر مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها كأن في أذنيه وقر. As if there is a problem in his ears. ثم يصر مستكبرا كأن لم يسمعها كأن في أذنيه وقر. This is istikbar. He hears the ayat of Allah. He hears what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to him, and then he understands. ثم يحرفونه من بعد ما عقلوه. Then he understands them, because Allah guarantee the understanding also, not just hearing. Allah says, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. We will show them indeed our signs within themselves and from outside. في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى till it will become clear. حتى يتبين لهم, according them, for them, it will be plain and manifest that it is the truth. حتى يتبين له أنه الحق. If you say how it will be possible, how can Allah guarantee for every single human being in this planet? Some lives in that geographical area, some lives in that distant. Remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala providing them their sustenance. The one who is able to provide them their sustenance, surely He is able to send them His ayat, to show them His ayat. He says, هو الذي ينزل عليكم هو الذي يريكم آياته وينزل لكم من السماء ماء. He is the one who shows you His ayat, and He is the one, the same one, who sends down to you the rain. So the one who is feeding and the one who is sending the water, and do not neglect His servant, of course it's much easier for him to show His ayat, to show His signs. So Allah guaranteed for everyone to show him His ayat, His signs, that He is the Creator and that He is the One. So the reality which should be understood by every human being, that there is a Creator, the only one God, and that He is one. It cannot be two or three. And the signs for this reality, the signs which indicate this reality, is everywhere. Allah says, that person who hears our ayat or sees our ayat, but he behaves as if he didn't see, as وَمَنْ عَمِيَ قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ بَصَائِرُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, you have received our clarities. فَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ فَلِنَفْسِهِ, whoever our clarifications, whoever look at it and see it, he will benefit from it. Its benefit will return to himself. وَمَنْ عَمِيَ, and who behaved as if he didn't see, like the blind one, he will receive the harm of that behaving. وَمَنْ عَمِيَ فَعَلَيْهَا. So وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ أَفَّاكٍ أَثِيمٍ. Allah says, woe unto those who is not upright, who do not behave uprightly, who turn away and sinful. يَسْمَعُ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ. Then Allah give us detail about His treatment. He says, يَسْمَعُ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ. He hears the ayat of Allah. ثُمَّ يُصِرُّ مُسْتَكْبِرًا. Then he insists as if he didn't hear. كَأَنْ لَمْ يَسْمَعْهَا. Then Allah says, فَبَشِّرْهُ. So, therefore, بَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Give him a glad tidings about the painful torment. فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ يَوْمَ يُحْمَى عَلَيْهَا فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ فَتُكْوَى بِهَا جِبَاهُهُمْ. But here we are talking about the righteous people, about those whom Allah blessed them. Allah says the difference between these people and those whom I mentioned about them. These people, إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ الرَّحْمَنِ. When the ayat of the Rahman, of the Most Gracious, is recited to them, خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا. They prostrated themselves like this. Prostrating before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا. They show that they understood and realized the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His signs, and they show their respect to Him. خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا. When they hear our signs, the signs of the most gracious, they do not behave like the others. They prostrate themselves, خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا وَبُكِيًّا, and they weep. خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا وَبُكِيًّا. They are prostrating and weeping. These are the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them from the prophets and from the others whom Allah guided them and chose them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and favor us and to give us the same understanding and give us the same state. خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا وَبُكِيًّا. This was one of the prostration ayat, and every believer or every human being who has that feeling in his heart, who feels that the Creator created him and he is the only one, and he should respect him, he should prostrate himself before him. When he reads the ayat or the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will understand that there is a coincidence between the verses of Allah and between His creation, between the feelings and innermost thoughts in his heart. When he feel that coincidence, he will prostrate himself before the Almighty and will say, "O my creation, O my Creator, please guide me." We do say the same thing in every prayer 5 times in a day, and in every rak'ah we say, "Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim." O the Creator of the heavens and the earth, please guide us. Please guide us to the straight path that you, the path of those whom you favored, whom you blessed upon them. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.